Bonjour tout le monde. Hi everybody. Great to see you. I hope you're all healthy, particularly those who are arriving from the Commonwealth. Ça me fait plaisir de vous voir. So, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, we all know, is the biggest threat to our security since World War II. It's also an attack on the rules that ensures our collective safety. Canada has been, on many occasions, the architect of these rules, or sometimes even its engineer, and we just can't stand by as they are challenged. Nous avons été là, nous sommes là, et nous serons là pour l'Ukraine, pour sa souveraineté, pour son intégrité territoriale, et aussi pour son droit de choisir son propre avenir. Également, nous devons reconnaître que nous entrons une nouvelle phase du conflit. Many of you asked me the question earlier this week, and my answer to you was the fact that we're now entering a new phase of the conflict. The first one was preparing for the invasion. The second one is definitely the illegal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, which is still happening as we speak. We all know that. But also, this third phase is about the impacts that are felt around the world about what is happening in Ukraine. And so globally, we know that the war is causing food insecurity. It is also causing energy crisis, supply chain disruptions, and of course, financial pain. And this is fueling more conflict and more unrest. That's why Canada must react strategically to promote our interests and also to promote democracy against authoritarian regimes. We need to push back against Russian influence, may it be their soft power, may it be their disinformation campaigns, or again, their brute force. To achieve this, we believe that diplomacy remains one of the most effective ways to support security and stability, and also to respond to challenges in a world experiencing a profound geopolitical shift. This is why today Canada is announcing that we are increasing our diplomatic footprint. Canada will be opening 4 new embassies in Estonia, in Lithuania, in Slovakia, and in Armenia. And we will also appoint ambassadors in these 4 embassies. We will also reinforce our presence in Latvia, which is home to our biggest military deployment in the world. And so therefore, as you can see, we're increasing our diplomatic presence along the eastern flank of Europe. Alors aujourd'hui, ce qu'on annonce, c'est que nous augmentons nos capacités diplomatiques. Nous allons ouvrir 4 nouvelles ambassades, la première en Estonie, la deuxième en Lituanie, la troisième en Slovaquie et finalement en Arménie. Et en plus, nous allons faire en sorte de renforcer nos capacités diplomatiques en Lettonie, où nous avons le plus grand déploiement militaire canadien au monde. Et donc, notre objectif est de vraiment renforcer le front diplomatique dans les pays qui ont des frontières communes avec la Russie. Plus que jamais, le Canada doit être sur le terrain. Il doit être connecté et il doit être engagé. More than ever, Canada must have its eyes and ears on the ground. And these investments in Canadian diplomacy are following the ones that we recently announced in Kigali, Rwanda, where we will be opening a new embassy and having a new ambassador, and also a new ambassador at the African Union. Donc, ces investissements, ces nouveaux investissements que j'annonce aujourd'hui s'ajoutent à ce qu'on a annoncé à Kigali, au Rwanda, c'est-à-dire l'ouverture d'une nouvelle ambassade au Rwanda avec un nouvel ambassadeur, mais également un nouvel ambassadeur à l'Union africaine. The message we're sending to the world is we are a committed NATO ally, an active member of the G7, of the Commonwealth, and also of la francophonie. And we want to engage with more partners that are threatened. We want to engage with fragile and emerging democracies, and also we want to engage with the global south. And last point, to our diplomats serving around the world. We believe in you, we support you, and we value your voice. Your insight and your work is more important than ever. Today's announcement is our vote of confidence in you. À tous nos diplomates qui nous représentent à travers le monde, on croit en vous, on croit en votre travail et on croit en votre perspective, votre valeur, votre approche. Et donc l'annonce d'aujourd'hui en fait foi. That's it. I'm ready for your question, folks.
Thank you, Minister. We'll now start the question. Are mics open?
Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News. Minister Joly, when you're meeting with, at a diplomatic level with allies, especially NATO allies, what do you say to them when they question why Canada isn't spending the 2% of GDP target? The fact that we're a G7 nation, you'd think that we would be.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last. Are you okay, Kevin?
Oh, yeah, I'm okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I didn't hear the last part of your...
Canada's a G7 country,
Yes.
and we're not spending our 2% commitment of GDP
Okay.
for military spending.
Good.
What do you say to allies when they ask why not?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So, well, you heard Stoltenberg earlier today in his bilat with the Prime Minister, but also in many of his interventions in the past. I think that Canadians can be proud of what we're doing, not only within NATO, but in general in the conflict of Ukraine. We have been playing a leadership role in training Ukrainian forces, more than 30,000 of them since 2014, in sending heavy weapons, in training military personnel and Ukrainian forces, and of course in helping the delivery of many weapons. And also we know that we are leading a very important presence, military presence, in Latvia. And my colleague Anita Anand will have more to say very soon on that.
When it comes to the request we heard today from President Zelensky, here, I'll take my mask.
Sorry, yeah, I can't.
It's okay. This will be a bit clearer. When it comes to the request, it's clear that every time that President Zelensky gets in front of Western powers, speed is the number one thing. They need weapons sooner, help sooner. How can Canada deliver the weapons it's promised and the help it's promised to Ukraine sooner?
Well, we're doing it as soon as we can, and we're very much involved in the delivery of weapons. And I think that at this point, and you've heard President Zelensky, when we were in Ukraine with him, as Canada has done a lot for Ukraine, and not only has it done a lot, it will continue to do even more, but also we'll work with other partners within the alliance to make sure that they also step up to the plate. It's important that everybody does our share.
Minister, it's Murray Brewster from CBC.
Yes.
President Zelensky has asked the United States to designate Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. Is that something Canada is prepared to do?
Well, I think when it comes to how we deal with Russia, we know that we've been all about isolating Russia diplomatically, economically, and politically. And that's what we'll continue to do. And any step forward in that direction will be done in consultation also with the G7.
Russia, however, is still part of the G20. Russia is still part of the Arctic Council. Those are areas where we have a voice. What does Canada intend to do?
Well, on the Arctic Council, you very much know that we have suspended the works of the Arctic Council because in light of Russia's chairmanship this year. That being said, I had many conversations here with my Scandinavian counterparts because we need to make sure that we keep the high Arctic a low-tension region. But at the same time, we have to take stock of what's going on. So that's why I'm working extremely hard with the 7 of the 8 Arctic Council members, which obviously are all NATO allies in light of Sweden and Finland's accession to NATO. On the question of the G20, obviously, and you've heard me say this, and I will continue to say this can't be business as usual, for the reason I just gave you about the diplomatic isolation of Russia. That being said, we are having ongoing conversations within the G7 to see how we'll deal with this issue, and we want to make sure that we are countering any form of Russian disinformation and propaganda that is being spread through the Global South, and even within other than G7 members of the G20.
Bonjour, Madame la Ministre. Christian
Bonjour,
Noël
Christian.
de Radio-Canada. Pour faire un suivi à mon collègue M. Brewster, si le Canada déclarait la Russie un État qui finance le terrorisme, en quoi est-ce que ça changerait notre réponse en Ukraine?
Je pense que notre réponse, elle est très forte et on en a fait beaucoup. On peut en faire toujours plus. Et c'est l'objectif de l'annonce aujourd'hui, de renforcer notre présence diplomatique dans des pays qui sont menacés par la Russie, de s'assurer de contrer toute forme de désinformation. Et je pense qu'on doit prendre conscience de ce qui se passe dans le monde présentement. Il y a un tournant, il y a un shift qui se fait au niveau géopolitique et le Canada doit être encore plus présent. Maintenant, sur la question de Murray un petit peu plus tôt, j'ai répondu et on va toujours agir de façon concertée avec les membres du G7.
Est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui a été discuté avec vos alliés des membres du G7 au cours des derniers jours, c'est-à-dire déclarer la Russie un État qui finance le terrorisme?
Vous savez, le G7 a plusieurs discussions sur la façon de faire en sorte que les Ukrainiens puissent être capables de se défendre, qu'on puisse les aider à défendre leur souveraineté et leur intégrité territoriale. Les Ukrainiens peuvent compter sur le Canada pour être une des voix les plus fortes, non seulement à l'OTAN, mais aussi au sein du G7.
Hello. Excuse me if you've already addressed this, but over the weekend, the New York Times reported that Canada was among several other NATO member states that has had special forces on the ground physically in Ukraine since the war began. I was wondering if you could confirm that or address it. And secondly, it's often said that NATO is a defensive alliance. That's what NATO supporters will say in response to criticism that NATO is excessively aggressive, whether it's Russia or anybody else who makes that criticism. And now that it's taken on China as the strategic focus, is it fair to say that NATO is an expansionist alliance or something to that effect? Because last I checked, China is nowhere near the North Atlantic.
A couple of things on that. First and foremost, you already know that Canada has trained more than 30,000 Ukrainian forces through Operation Unifier. And I think this is helpful in light of the fact that not only have we sent heavy weapons, but more and more the weapons we're sending are NATO ready. And therefore, that was the entire mandate of Operation Unifier, to make sure that Ukraine would be much more NATO ready. For the rest, in terms of the operations, in terms of I'm answering your question. So, in terms of military operations of special forces, obviously I won't comment. On the question of NATO's mandate, what I can say to you is it is important that we take stock of what's happening in the world and the fact that we're dealing with a more assertive China. It is not only nations that are bordering the Pacific, such as Canada, that are dealing with it, but also throughout NATO and definitely also in Europe. What the strategic concept is reflecting today is the conversations we've been having, particularly over the past 6 months. And the fact that China has been repeating the Russian narrative over Ukraine, which in itself is extremely problematic. Now, of course, we will continue to engage diplomatically China. That's definitely Canada's goal. But we need to take stock of the fact that the security and stability of the world is also affected by this new approach of China. And meanwhile, we're working on an Indo-Pacific strategy. My goal is to make sure that this takes also into account Canada's relationship with China. And so I'll have more to say in the coming weeks about that.
Bonjour, Madame Joly. Marie va
Allô, Marie.
Allô. Je voulais revenir sur la question du début, sur le 2%, la cible de 2% du PIB. C'est vrai que le secrétaire général a mentionné ce que le Canada fait déjà, mais il a aussi dit qu'il est, si bien qu'il est normal que les pays réduisent leurs dépenses en matière de défense quand on est en temps de paix, je paraphrase. Il faut aussi qu'elles soient en mesure de les rehausser en temps de crise. Je paraphrase encore. Vous répondez quoi à ça du fait que nous, on descend au lieu de monter vers la cible de 2 %?
Je pense que le secrétaire général a aussi réagi en disant qu'en effet, le Canada a augmenté ses dépenses. On vient tout juste d'augmenter nos dépenses en matière militaire, 8 milliards de plus, les investissements aussi dans NORAD, le fait qu'on passe non seulement de 800 soldats à 1400 soldats en Lettonie, mais on met à la disposition de l'OTAN 3400 soldats, et ma collègue Anita Anand aura plus à dire sous peu sur cette question. Maintenant aussi, il va de soi que non seulement on investit dans nos opérations militaires, parce qu'en effet, le monde a changé, mais aussi on veut investir davantage dans nos opérations diplomatiques. Et c'est pour ça aujourd'hui que j'annonce 4 nouvelles ambassades. C'est pour ça aussi qu'il y a eu des annonces la semaine passée en Afrique. Parce qu'on doit s'assurer de contrer le narratif russe, contrer le narratif chinois, et on doit être proactif dans la promotion de la démocratie. On fait face à d'immenses crises présentement, que ce soit encore la pandémie, que ce soit les effets des changements climatiques, que ce soit la crise alimentaire mondiale. Et donc, ça fait en sorte qu'il y a beaucoup d'instabilité, beaucoup de potentiels conflits. Et on doit être là sur le terrain pour savoir qu'est-ce qui se passe et réagir de façon rapide.
Les États-Unis ont fait des grosses annonces de contributions militaires. Je comprends que Mme Anand va avoir d'autres choses à dire plus tard, mais pour l'instant, c'est vous qu'on a avec nous. Et je doute que les contributions soient égales à celles des États-Unis. Donc, encore là-dessus, comment est-ce que vous expliquez ça, que vous marteliez qu'on en fait plus, mais qu'on n'est clairement pas au même niveau que les autres, là?
Bien, je pense que c'est la même question que tu me poses, Marie. Essentiellement, nous, on investit. En matière d'équipement, on est un des premiers pays à avoir envoyé de l'artillerie lourde à l'Ukraine et un des pays à en envoyer le plus en fonction de notre propre équipement. On a mis dans le budget 500 millions de plus pour l'armement militaire pour l'Ukraine, et c'est ce qu'on fait. On va continuer à l'envoyer. Et en même temps, on fait beaucoup de logistique et de livraison d'équipement. Donc, on joue notre rôle.
David Aiken, Global News. Good afternoon.
Good.
Secretary General Stoltenberg's been going on like all week how significant and historic this strategic concept is, with the language about China, the tougher language on Russia. And so I wonder, could you maybe give us some insight, as your government was considering and looking at this strategic concept, how specifically Canada will fit into this strategic concept? What are we going to do in the Pacific? Are we going to do anything in the Pacific? Is it technology? Is it new research? How does Canada support this new strategic concept?
Well, obviously Canada was actively part of the discussions regarding the strategic concept. And at this point, David, I don't have the exact numbers of ministerial meetings that I've had in NATO, but at least I think it's more than 5. And obviously also my colleague Anita Anand has been participating to these conversations, and the Prime Minister himself as well. Now, we are working on the Indo-Pacific strategy, and obviously the Indo-Pacific strategy is about different things, clearly diversifying our trade, but also taking stock of the fact that, like I said before, we're dealing with a more assertive China, and therefore, as a Pacific nation, we need to assert ourselves. We need to make sure that we're secure at home, but also in the region, particularly in the Northern Pacific. So these are the things that we're looking at. We have a very strong advisory committee that are supporting me in the development of this new strategy, and my goal is to work on this in the coming weeks and months. But of course, I think that it was important for the strategic concept to be announced and delivered before we would come up with our Indo-Pacific strategy. So now you understand why there's been some timing issues.
Here. Rama Sofia Rajdi, United States Press Agency. Mrs. Minister, you have unveiled the new embassies, like you said, and you also mentioned soft power and reinforcing diplomacy. When you say that, do you imply a combination of soft power and military aid in these countries, or is it just fighting against propaganda? Thank you.
Thank you. So, in Latvia, obviously, we have an embassy. We want to make sure that we are having a bigger embassy with more staff. And meanwhile, obviously, it's to link with our presence, which is more than 1,000 people, 1,400 soldiers that are based out of Latvia. And as I mentioned, my colleague Anita Anand will have more to say on this very issue of Latvia. Now, on the question of the under embassies, it's really for diplomatic outreach. It's to make sure that we do political analysis, that we do our, what diplomats do the best, understand what's going on in the different societies, provide that feedback to the team, and then we can engage with other countries within NATO and also the G7. Because we're as strong at the table of the G7 or at NATO or the Commonwealth or Francophonie, then we have information and impact on the world. So that's why this is about showing up. This is also about having a strong voice, and this is about showing leadership.
I'm Minister Brian Platt from Bloomberg. When it comes to the military, we're a fairly small power. When it comes to energy, specifically oil and gas, are a much bigger power. So what kind of conversations have you been having here with other countries about what Canada can do to help Europe move off of Russian oil and gas?
Mm-hmm. So there's different things. Definitely in the concept, so I'll do two flanks. On the Pacific side, we are deepening our relationship with Japan, as we know, because we're investing in the Kitimat facility, which will increase our capacity to export. On the eastern flank of Canada, so on the eastern side, definitely we're having conversations with many European partners. It is important for Canada to be able to step up and to help our European friends that are dealing with very difficult energy realities. Meanwhile, we need to do it in a way that we're also dealing with the climate change issue. And this is exactly the conversations we're having, particularly with the Germans and also with the Spanish. And meanwhile, what I would also add to that is Canada can provide solutions that are also in line with our climate change agenda, because there's nothing worse than Russian oil and gas when it comes to energy, carbon emissions, and that's why we can step up and do a work.
We'll take one last question.
Hi, Minister Esther Cid Iglesias from La Razón newspaper. Welcome to Madrid.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you regarding the new strategic concept.
Yes.
What has been the main friction point or obstacle between allies, in your opinion?
I think that I would say the strategic concept has been long discussed, and I would say there were no surprises. What I'm really happy about is the fact that Sweden and Finland are now joining NATO. Canada wants to be, has been one of the most supportive countries, I would say, in the sense that we're one of the first to say that we would welcome them within NATO. I was in Finland at the outset of the conversations about joining NATO. My colleague from Sweden was in Canada also at the beginning of the conversation. And we need to make sure that we do this very quickly. And so we look forward to continuing the discussions within NATO and also working with Sweden and Finland, which are both Arctic nations, and at the same time with Turkey.
Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui m'a fait la conférence de presse.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you so much.